Okay, so welcome everyone. This is the Measure AA 2023 grant funding webinar. We'll be going over the grant round for this year and our community grants program. My name is Sarah Haugen. I'm a project manager and the grant program coordinator for the Restoration Authority. And I'm joined by...
Hello, Jessica Davenport.
And so I think we'll just get started. Jessica is going to share a bit about the Restoration Authority.
Thanks, Sarah. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to start by giving some background on the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority. It's a regional agency that was created to fund shoreline projects that will protect, restore, and enhance the Bay. Measure AA, which was passed in June of 2016, generates funds for the Restoration Authority through a parcel tax. And its jurisdiction is the shoreline of the 9 counties of the San Francisco Bay Area, excluding the Delta Primary Zone. The Restoration Authority can fund habitat projects that will restore, protect, or enhance tidal wetlands or other natural habitats along the shoreline. It can also fund flood management features that are part of a habitat project and public access or recreational amenities that are part of a habitat project. We have a wide range of eligible grantees. It includes all levels of government agencies, tribal governments, nonprofits, and owners or operators of shoreline parcels. And our eligible locations, again, are all the 9 Bay Area counties. And it's along the shorelines of San Francisco Bay, including San Pablo Bay, Carquinez Strait, Sassoon Bay, and most of northern Contra Costa County shoreline. So when we say along the shoreline, what do we mean by that? This includes subtidal habitats. That's the areas below mean low tide within a reasonable distance of the shoreline that have important habitats that we want to restore, like oyster and other shellfish habitats and eelgrass habitat. The baylands, that's between high and low tides, and areas that would be impacted by tides, inundated by the tides if a levee were breached. So for example, an area that could be acquired might not be tidal right now, but it could be acquired and restored to tidal action. Also the transition zones, those important upland areas adjacent to the tidal wetlands or potential tidal wetlands that can provide transitional habitat or even marsh migration space over time as sea level rises. We can fund pretty much every phase of a project, from acquisition through planning, design, permitting to construction or other forms of implementation, such as planting plants and removing invasives, operations, monitoring, evaluation, and maintenance. And it's very important to think about how to engage communities in as many of these phases as possible. Measure AA has a variety of eligibility criteria, and the first main area has to do with safe, clean water and pollution prevention. So we can fund projects that improve water quality by reducing pollution and engaging in restoration activities, shoreline cleanups and trash removal, and then restoring the wetlands themselves is a great way to reduce pollution because they provide natural filters. Also, we can support restoring creeks where they flow into the bay. Another really important area of eligibility is projects that enhance vital fish, bird, and wildlife habitat. And this, there's a focus on public lands such as the National Wildlife Refuges, regional parks, state wildlife areas, and also just protecting and restoring areas that are not yet protected, to enhance these habitats. And finally, to provide for stewardship, maintenance, and monitoring of habitat restoration projects to make sure they continue to provide benefits to wildlife and people. So the third area is flood protection. Wetlands themselves provide flood protection by dampening wave energy, so levees don't have to be built quite as high, but our funds can also be used to build and improve levees that are a necessary part of a wetland restoration project. Finally, eligible elements include shoreline public access. So our funds can be used to provide new or repair deteriorating trails and signs and facilities along the shoreline, and to provide interpretive materials for special outreach events about pollution prevention, wildlife habitat, and public access, and especially to encourage community engagement in the restoration projects. So our regular grant round application process starts with submitting a pre-application. And when you do that, we will get in touch to schedule a consultation to give feedback. You'll then need to submit a full application by early October 2023. I believe it's October 6th. And then staff, and as well as our advisory committee members, will review the applications. And then once there's a set of projects that rise to the top, those will be recommended in a preliminary list to the board, and then each one taken when it's ready for a full staff recommendation to the board to authorize funding. So our application period recently opened July 7th. It runs through October 6th. We do strongly encourage people to fill out a pre-application and schedule a consultation. We're able to guide you and how to make your project as competitive as possible to fit our requirements, things that you can do to strengthen your application or the way you explain what you're doing. And then there will be awards of funding starting in the spring of next year. We have approximately 19 million available in this round, and there's more information on the grants page of our website.
Great, thanks, Jessica. So now I'll just talk a bit more about how we review applications. So there's 3 sections we look at. Jessica already covered the eligibility criteria, which is those 4 program areas. And an application does not need to satisfy all 4 of those, but can do a few of them well or one of them very well. The next area we look at are the Measure AA prioritization criteria. And you can see here they are greatest positive impact, long-term impact, geographic distribution. By this we mean where in the Bay this is happening versus where we've already funded projects. We take a look at that. How your project might leverage state and federal dollars as well as partnerships. We don't require matching funds, but we like to see how you might leverage funds with other organizations. Also, if your project benefits an economically disadvantaged community or EDC, this is a phrase we use in Measure AA, and it refers to median household income, less than 80% of the area median income. And we have maps on our website if you'd like to see where those are. Also, if the project benefits the region's economy, engages youth and adults, incorporates monitoring, maintenance, and stewardship, as Jessica mentioned in the other section. And also if it meets, how well it meets the selection criteria of the State Coastal Conservancy, the SFBRA Conservation and Development Commission, or BCDC, and the SFBRA joint venture. The ones I just listed are all the same from previous years, but this year we have a couple new ones. The first is considering contributions to landscape scale ecological characteristics. So larger scale projects that contribute to restoring the habitats, larger habitats in the Bay. and also demonstrating a serious effort to engage California Indian or Native American tribes in your project. And you can refer to the Wetland Regional Monitoring Program's Tribal Engagement Best Practices if you would like to see some strategies for that. And that is linked in the RFP on our website. The next section we consider is likelihood of success of the applicant. So we look at the applicant's history, carrying out projects like the one proposed, how reasonable the budget and schedule seem to complete the project, how they leverage resources and partnerships, and monitoring maintenance and stewardship, as I mentioned before. We also look at the level of community involvement and benefits or innovative partnerships. So thinking about who are the partners that are contributing to the project. If you would provide support letters from those partners, just helps to see. Demonstrating if there is community support, how they'll be involved in your project and the benefits your project might provide to the community. And also looking at how it might benefit an economically disadvantaged community or EDC. New this year is showing coordination with local jurisdictions. If your project's bigger and involves the city or county, things like that, wanting to see some coordination there. And again, this is all in our RFP if you need more details. So these three areas, the eligibility criteria, priority criteria, and likelihood of success are how we evaluate projects. The first is worth 20 points. The priority criteria is 40 points, and the likelihood of success is another 40 points. So our reviewers think about how well each project satisfies these criteria. We also have a qualitative evaluation section where our reviewers look at top 3 strengths and weaknesses of a proposal. So it's not just points, it's also qualitative. And so as Jessica mentioned, we greatly encourage you to submit a pre-application because it's a chance to get feedback from us on how to improve your proposal ahead of the October deadline. And there's no specific deadline for the pre-proposal, it's just recommended. When you are submitting your full application, you'll submit the PDF cover page. And do test this cover page. We've heard about some technical difficulties in the past, so just make sure you get all your info in there. A Word doc with your application and the budget in an Excel document. You also include your supporting documents such as project maps and designs, project photos, and support letters as they're relevant. And new this year, if you are not the landowner where your project is taking place, we're asking for a letter from that landowner showing their support of the project. And if you are mentioning tribal partners, we ask that you include letters from them as well, so that we really can understand if their level of support for your project. And again, our grants webpage has all this information and these documents to prepare your application. Looking a bit closer at what we mean by innovative partnerships and community benefits. So innovative partnerships can be a collaboration between you and community-based nonprofits, environmental nonprofits, different levels of state and tribal governments, healthcare providers, faith-based organizations, philanthropic or civic organizations, educational institutions, the arts, businesses, etc. Whatever is relevant to your project. So for example, if you're restoring habitat, but also want to include an education element, it would make sense to include an educational institution or organization. So just clarify that for how you're going to carry it out. And demonstrating benefits to communities, especially those that are EDCs, as I've mentioned. We are looking for any direct involvement from the community where the project's taking place, and if the applicant has a track record working in that community already. And also if there are going to be direct benefits to the community, such as relieving different stressors like recreational amenities, resilience to climate change, reductions in pollution burden, civic engagement, and leadership opportunities. And if you need some examples or strategies for this, you can look at the State Coastal Conservancy's Tips for Meaningful Community Engagement, which is also linked in the RFP. A few examples of projects in our regular grant round, just to show you the breadth of the projects we can fund. One was Heron's Head Shoreline Resilience Project. This was with the Port of San Francisco, and they worked with Literacy for Environmental Justice to hire and train young adults in bay ecology and hands-on conservation. which included native plant propagation, revegetation, and invasive plant control. So that was smaller scale, but had a really strong partnership with a community-based organization. Another example is the Lower Walnut Creek Restoration Project, which was with Contra Costa County, and they restored creekside and wetland habitats by breaching levees to introduce the tides to diked former baylands. This was a larger scale project and would be one that would say showed strong landscape scale restoration. So that's the range of things, or an example of the range we can do. There's also many more past funded projects on our website if you'd like a better idea of what we funded in the past. Now we're moving on to the community grants program application process, or the program overall. And this is a separate grant track that is separate from the grant round that's happening right now. It's a rolling application process that has more of staff involvement as needed for development of the project. So it starts with the applicant submitting their application to us. We will schedule a consultation to provide feedback. And with that feedback, the applicant can submit a revised application. Then staff and advisory committee members will review it. And then those that are selected to move forward will provide technical assistance going towards the board for getting approval for funding. And so, as I mentioned, it's a rolling deadline. The application's on our website. And there's an initial and revised stage, as I was mentioning. The total funding available per project is $200,000. And there's the link. You can find it on our website. The idea for this grant program is thinking about those community-based organizations that might not have capacity to apply for the regular grant round yet. So that's why it's a smaller dollar amount, keeping the scope manageable and providing that technical assistance. Some look at the eligibility for projects in our community grants program. Community visioning, led by CBOs in EDCs. I'm saying acronyms, but I've been saying them a couple times. Training for leaders in these communities to develop and apply for small shoreline habitat projects. Supporting CBOs in EDCs to gain knowledge of shoreline issues and to build relationships with government agencies and nonprofits, and also to implement shoreline habitat projects that have strong community benefits. So you might have heard of the Oakland Shoreline Leadership Academy. This was one that wasn't technically a community grant, but did help build relationships with partners and train up leaders in an EDC. So just one to think about. That was funded before. The prioritization criteria is the same as the regular grant round, but I've bolded and made gold the two that we really focus on in this grant program, which is benefiting the EDCs, as I mentioned, as well as engaging youth and adults. And as mentioned before, a project doesn't have to do all of these, but can do several of them well. It's just a matter of how well they do each of them. And there's specific prioritization criteria for the community grants program, which are achieving specific community benefits in the foreseeable future, meaning 1 to 5 years, as opposed to, say, a 10 or 20 year timeline for some of those bigger plans that get put together. We want to see tangible benefits in the ground, including a well-defined community engagement process, and also showing the need for urgency. You know, is this a pressing need or a fleeting opportunity in the community? We also, again, look at likelihood of success for the applicant, as we do with the regular grant round. But I would say for the community grant, think of it in context of who the partners are, because let's say a CBO is really strong with their community engagement, but maybe to have less experience with shoreline restoration. Who is the partner they're going to work with that is more experienced? And you know, that the gaps in knowledge can be filled by partners. So showing that is important for these grants. But yes, providing evidence of these partnerships, which can be in support letters, talking about your community engagement and involvement, how the project will benefit the community, and especially if it's an economically disadvantaged community. And so for this application process, I just covered these different sections of criteria. The only difference in evaluation is that we rank it high, medium, low instead of by points, but otherwise it's pretty similar as far as what we can fund under our eligibility with Measure AA. And so the applicants can submit their proposal online and we'll be in touch to provide any feedback. It's just a Word document with some questions, their proposed schedule and budget, including any maps or photos and support letters that are relevant to your project. And again, all of this information is on our website. An example of a past community grant that was funded was the Candlestick Point Stewardship Project with Literacy for Environmental Justice. They worked in the Candlestick Point State Recreation Area near Bayview Hunters Point, and they worked with their Eco Apprentice program to plant 6,500 native plants, clean up trash, provide job training to these youth in the program, and they engaged more than 300 community members in stewardship. So that's just one example, and you can find more on our website. I believe we've funded now 5 total of these, so you can see some of those on our website. And unless we're missing anything, I think that covers our areas for the grants. Anything to add, Jessica, before we take questions?
Well, I did see a question in the chat. So I don't have anything general to add, but I can just note that there's a question of asking whether someone can submit an application with more than one project, e.g. shoreline habitat and public access, if they both have CEQA and are on similar construction timelines. And in response to that question, I would say that many of our projects have both habitat and public access components. I don't think we usually consider them to be separate projects, but maybe the person who asked this question was talking about a case where they were separate projects. So it's hard to say. I guess I would say that in general, we have had applicants submit more than one application at a time, but we like to see people prioritize their top project. In this case, it was about several projects in one application, and I haven't seen that before, and it would be a little bit tricky for us to analyze. Generally, we would want one project per application. So if whoever asked that, if that didn't answer your question, feel free to unmute and do a follow-up question.
And Jessica, we have a question. Is pond restoration work eligible? Is invasive plant removal enough of a habitat restoration project, i.e. what is considered a competitive eligible habitat restoration?
Sure. So the pond restoration, I would have to say it depends. It would need to be along the shoreline of San Francisco Bay. So within those areas that we discussed, subtidal, between the high and low tide, or in that upland transition zone for marsh migration and transitional habitat. So there could be a pond within one of those areas that could be eligible. Invasive plant removal, it's may or may not be competitive. It depends on the scale. We currently fund a very large scale invasive Spartina project, but even that one, it does include habitat restoration as well as removal of Spartina or control of Spartina. Invasive plant removal sometimes falls in the category of ongoing maintenance, and that generally is less competitive than restoration of new areas, but it's also really important. So, I think if it's part of a restoration project where you're going to be removing invasives, or if you have a really large community engagement or youth apprenticeship, workforce development component, that could make invasive plant removal more competitive.
Thanks, Jessica. I can answer a few logistical questions that came in. Will the PowerPoint be emailed to us? Yes, we can do that. We're also recording this, so you can find it on our website later. And then what are the percentage breakdowns of scoring for Measure AA grants? I mentioned the 3 areas of evaluation are the eligibility criteria, that is 20 points. The prioritization criteria is 40, and likelihood of success is also 40. So you can calculate the percentage on it if you'd like, but that's how we score that. And then when do final decisions get made, and when does the project begin end for both grant rounds? We will be evaluating applications after the deadline in October through the fall, and then the staff will come out with recommended projects that we will bring to our board. So that is, basically the fall is when that happens. And as far as projects beginning and ending, generally, Jessica, it's after they get approved by the board. So it kind of depends how ready the project is to go to the board once we make the recommendation. It could be early 2024, it might be later in the year. And for the community grants, it's rolling. So it just depends.
Yeah, and as far as if that was also trying to understand the length of the project itself, projects, we generally are looking for projects that are in the range of 1 to 5 years as far as how long they last. It's sometimes hard to project out longer than 5 years accurately of what you'll actually need as far as a budget and your timeline. So I don't know if that was what that one was getting at. And as far as whether a for-profit company can qualify as an operator for the eligibility requirements, it is like a owner or operator of a shoreline parcel is the language of Measure AA, of saying who's qualified, who's eligible. I would say that we've only so far in the 6 grant rounds given to one private company, which was Montezuma Wetlands LLC, which is a company completely dedicated to restoring wetlands. So it's not common for us to give to a private landowner, but they are eligible.
And then a question about, can we know other orgs on the call so we can consider partnerships? I would say, because this is all coming in over a period of months, if you're seeking a specific partner, ask us and we can see who we might connect you with based on who's already applied or who we know tends to apply. So that's kind of a depend.
And I would also say that we have been doing annual networking sessions, and this year they're going to be associated with our board tours. So that's an opportunity to go out to the shoreline. There's going to be one in each of the 4 regions around the Bay, north, south, east, west. And that's an opportunity to meet people in person and explore partnerships. In the past, we had those on Zoom, so people could meet each other that way. But we were asked to do it in person, so we're going to be doing that. And then I'm seeing another question. You've already funded Heron's Head with, well, it says left, but it's LEDGE. It's Literacy for Environmental Justice. Can this location partners be considered again? We actually do have a follow-up grant to the Port of San Francisco for Heron's Head, and they are doing monitoring and adaptive management under that grant. So that's an ongoing project. And we can put you in touch with the Port of San Francisco if you want to get connected with that. Let's see. What has not yet been answered?
I'm seeing a question in the chat. Any advice for choosing to apply through the competitive or the community tracks? And that really depends on you as the applicant, where you are with your project history and partners. So if you're more of a city or large scale organization, you might be ready for the competitive grant round if you have a strong track record of doing bay restoration. If this is newer for you and you're a community-based organization wanting a more flexible timeline and more staff support, the community grant is a better track, bearing in mind that's limited to $200,000. So it depends on what kind of project in your experience, but you can always reach out to us if you're not sure.
Yeah, and I would just emphasize that the community grants are only for community-based organizations located in economically disadvantaged communities. So it's a pretty narrow definition, whereas the regular grant round is open pretty wide as far as applicants. I saw some question about, will you be evaluating projects by project area for eligibility, such as if there are 2 or more projects in the Sassoon Marsh area, how many are chosen? That's an interesting question. We do have a geographic distribution requirement within Measure AA that half of our funds need to be divided up according to the census from 2010, where there's more population, more funding will be provided by the end of the 20 years. And we track that to see if we're on track each year. So for example, in the North Bay, where Sassoon Marsh is located, we are pretty much on track, but it's only half of the money. So we can continue to provide more money to the North Bay. If there were 2 or more projects in the Sassoon Marsh, it's possible that more than one could be funded. We would be more looking at that overall distribution by region rather than a specific area. So, for example, I think we had 2 projects in the Sassoon Marsh last year. We have Montezuma Wetlands and the Goat Island project with the Solano Land Trust, I believe. Okay, are projects adjacent to Sassoon Marsh, specifically off the Cordelia Slough, eligible? You know, we'd have to look at the specifics of the location, and you're welcome to send us a map and point out exactly where you're talking about, because we'd have to see if it's you know, within the distance of what we're talking about. As far as if it's an upland adjacent area. So, all right. There's a question, what does it mean for the nonprofit to be located in the EDC? If your office is in Noe Valley, but you have a project in the Bayview Inner Sunset, for example, or fiscal sponsors in Berkeley. I would say the fiscal sponsor location doesn't really matter. And just to explain the intent behind this, the EDCs being located, I mean, the community-based organizations being located in an economically disadvantaged community, what we've observed is the ones that are actually located there, they are more rooted in that community. They have residents who serve on their staff and their board who are living there. That's kind of the concept of a community-based organization. And often they have other kinds of services they provide to the community, like a food bank or support with legal issues and things like that. So those are the kinds of organizations that are being targeted by the community grants program, because we've seen a lot of environmental groups that are also really great, and we totally welcome them to apply, but that's not the community-based organization type of organization that we're talking about.
Any other questions? People are welcome to also unmute to ask your question. And you can also email us at the grants@sfbrestore.org if you think of something else later. Cool. Well, if there's nothing else, I say slowly in case someone's typing.
And I see there's a 1 for the Q&A. Does that mean
I think we already answered that.
we answered it, but it was just not typed in or something?
Mhm.
Okay, got it. All right. Well, I guess, since we do have extra time, I suppose if people wanted to stay on and introduce themselves to know who's here, we could do that, but wasn't part of the original program.
Yeah, and I'll
But
stop recording as well.
yeah, that's a good idea.
Just a moment.